Hey everybody, welcome back to Lithography. Kramzer here. We also got Joe and Jason, and it is time to rank our favorite albums of the year 1970. 1970, kicking off a new decade, which is going to kind of, in many people's eyes, bring an end to the purity and original spirit of rock and roll and kind of make way to a new commercial movement. Rock radio is going to be more prevalent in what gets airtime, what kind of gets recognized across the mainstream media. But then you're going to get a lot of more intellectual stuff, classical influences with prog later on in the decade, punk, R&B and disco is going to take over a lot of the major airwaves. That's the decade. But right now we're going to focus on 1970. Rock and roll still very much alive, but I kind of feel like this year is a bit of a bittersweet year. There is definitely a lot of amazing music. You get the birth and the early signs of prog with bands like Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Yes, King Crimson's already been around, Jethro Tull. You also get early metal with Black Sabbath and Mountain, but you also kind of have like a lot of band breakups, and you get start to see a little bit of death. So kind of the repercussions of the lifestyle of the rock and roll culture heating up. Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix pass away. That'll end the Jimi Hendrix experience. The Doors kick out Jim Morrison. Joni Mitchell retires. She'll come back, but she's kind of fed up and had enough. Simon and Garfunkel break up. Randy Bachman leaves the Guess Who. And of course, the major breakup are the Beatles, which you'll get some good solo stuff out of it from all four, but they are done after 1970, which take a moment. But a lot of really, really good competition for our favorite albums. I've got mine ready to go. It was actually a little easier than I thought for the winner. Getting the runners up was tough. Joe, you want to kick us off with 1970?
Yeah, this was brutal for me. My top, there's probably about 10 albums that would normally make my top 5 list, I think. So it was just a matter of, cutting out stuff like Van Morrison, Moondance, great album, didn't make the list. Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon & Garfunkel, great album, didn't make the cut. It's just, there's too much. So it was tough, but my top 5 are going to be, I guess in no order, the runners up. I got Elton John with the Tumbleweed Connection, his sort of Western country foray. Great album. I had it number 1 for a couple minutes, and then I had to change it out. And we got Sunflower by the Beach Boys, probably my second or third favorite Beach Boys album. Great kind of comeback, although they never really went away. They kind of lost commercial appeal, and this was their least popular album, but it's fantastic. I have All Things Must Pass by George Harrison, post-Beatles. I think it's the best Beatles members solo album. I think it's a triple album, just totally packed with stuff. And I got Led Zeppelin 3 on the list. Not my most favorite Led Zeppelin, but I couldn't put it at number 1, even though I'm a huge Zeppelin fan. So that leaves my number 1. It's going to be, and this came out of nowhere, I got Neil Young with After the Gold Rush. I think it's his best album. I think the first half alone is just unbelievable. You got the big hit Southern Man. You have After the Gold Rush. It's sparse, but I think his voice sounds great. His guitar sounds great. The bass on the album is fantastic. I mean, growing up, probably I hadn't listened to this much, and kind of out of nowhere, after listening to all these albums, it kind of just jumped out at me as being the cream of the crop for 1970.
Nice. That is a surprise. I did not see that coming, but I'm a huge Neil Young fan, and I'm happy for you.
It really could have been any of those 5. Tomorrow it could be different.
Yeah, 70 was really tough. I think I said in another video already that 70 to 74 is kind of my favorite 5-year stretch in music history. And even more specifically, 70 and 71 are just ridiculous. And if you've watched our previous episodes, you would have found out that I'm a very big Beatles fan, and that carries over into their solo work as well. So at first glance of this year, I thought it was possible to have 5 Beatles related albums as my top 5. I think Plastic Ono Band is potentially my favorite John Lennon solo record. I think McCartney 1 is a very strong record. All Things Must Pass is great. Let It Be is great. You also get 2 Ringo records. So I thought maybe it might be very heavily Beatles. It's not as much so as I thought it was going to be. So records that Joe mentioned, like After the Gold Rush, miss my list. So does Tumbleweed Connection. Those were in contention, but fall short, as do Plastic Ono Band, Let It Be, McCartney 1. None of these are making my list. I guess we'll get into it. No specific order here except for the top one. My fourth runner-up is going to be Moondance by Van Morrison. Then I've got, for the third year in a row, making my runners-up list, I've got The Band with Stage Fright. Then we get into a little more, slightly more obscure records. McCartney's missing out in 70 for me because he got out-McCartneyed by a little-known guy recording in his home studio, going with the second self-titled record by Emmett Rhodes. If you don't know this record, really good. McCartney-esque, kind of, I think, what people expected the first McCartney solo record to be. It's very Beatles-esque, and McCartney went in a slightly different direction with his first solo record. And then I'm going with a very overlooked and underappreciated record. I think if there's any record on this list that's long overdue for a critical reevaluation, it's this one. One of the best rock and roll bands of all time.
Let me guess. Is it Deep Purple?
No. This is on AllMusic, this record gets 2 stars, but it's amazing. This is Mad Shadows by Mott the Hoople, their second record, a few years before they'd really break into the mainstream with their big David Bowie produced record, All the Young Dudes. And my number one, though, has to be All Things Must Pass. The triple record from George Harrison. I guess probably most people would consider it his debut solo album, even though he put out a couple more experimental records before this. Just a ton of great songs. He had so many saved up, and they're all great. The production, the songs are so personal, but the production is so big and grandiose that it's just, I don't know. It's a fantastic record. That's my 5 for 70.
Man, hearing your guys' runners up and the albums you had in consideration, yeah, we were right. 70, just so many amazing albums. So my runners up, I've got the final Simon and Garfunkel record, Bridge Over Troubled Water, which I think at the time set like a huge record for Grammys. Not that I put any stock in the Grammys, but just a little note there. I've also got Paranoid by Black Sabbath. I do like the other Black Sabbath record that came out this year. It's just a little bit too short for me, although I absolutely, when I went back and listened to it, I re-listened to The Wizard about 26, 27 times. That song is just so awesome. I also have Abractus by Santana in my running. And then it comes down to 2, Neil Young and Led Zeppelin. And I am the biggest Neil Young fan. After the Gold Rush is the runner-up, though. Led Zeppelin 3 is my number 1 album of 1970. I am a sucker for different guitar tunings. I absolutely love the spirit of it. I love sort of the majestic Western American feel, kind of the traveling kind of feel of the guitars, and with like That's the Way and Tangerine. But then like you've got just awesome rock and stuff like Celebration Day and Out on the Tiles, an Immigrant Song. It is my favorite, probably my favorite of the Zeppelin records. I absolutely just think Plant's voice is incredible. I think there's a ridiculous amount of underrated drumming by Bonham on here. And I just think it's the most encompassing of Zeppelin's message is all over this record, which is why I kind of hold it as the best record of 1970. I think it's right where rock and roll music should be, because Jimmy Page is really kind of showing off not just his technical ability, but kind of just his artistic ability with the guitar as a craft. And I think it's just awesome. I love every song on here. It's hard doing these lists because Neil Young is probably a top 5, definitely a top 10 artist for me. And that may have been his best chance to win an album of the year. But head to head, it's Zeppelin 3 for me. I've loved this record since I was about 9 or 10 years old. And I think it doesn't get the love it deserves. So yeah, 3 really good choices, guys. This was not easy. Jason's right. I think 70 to 74, probably the best 5-year span ever. We could probably do top 20s for all of those years. And I think 71 is going to be even harder. So please stay tuned for that. Any closing thoughts, guys?
Again, it's just so much quality. And I mean, I don't know if any of these albums are like in my top 10 all time or anything, but mean, I didn't even have Paranoid. I love Black Sabbath. Like that hurt me a little bit not being able to put that in. But there's just, I mean, I had Layla at number 1 a week ago. It didn't even make my honorable mentions. So
Yeah, you didn't even
just,
mention that.
no, I kind of forgot it. I mean, probably Eric Clapton's best ever work, and it doesn't even crack the top 5. So it's.
We didn't even mention T for the Tillerman, which is a really good record. There's a lot.
Yeah, I would just say, like, just because we don't mention someone doesn't mean we don't know about them or love them. There's just we're limiting it to our very favorites, and it's kind of agony. If we didn't mention your favorite record, don't feel bad. There's a good chance that we suffered a lot over the fact that it didn't make our list.
Yeah, this sucks. It's
I hate doing these. This is the worst.
It's like going to Baskin Robbins and your mom being like, you can only have one flavor. And you're like, well, there's 32 flavors. What am I supposed to do? All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Let us know what your personal favorite albums of 1970 were. Stay tuned for 1971 coming up next week. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell for the notifications, and comment. And we will see you next time on Listography.